talked about the different tools that were available, but I want to start, if I might, with Ashley, and if you could just tell us whether these tools have helped and where we are in regards to businesses in Maryland taking advantage of what was in the CARES Act in order to help our economy.
You, Senator, and your office for inviting the Maryland Chamber of Commerce to be with you today. We very much have valued our partnership with you over the years and look forward to continued work with your office toward making sure that our small businesses in particular in Maryland are able to weather this storm and overcome the COVID crisis and come out stronger on the other side. With respect to your question about the existing tools in the toolbox, I think absolutely. So a lot of those programs, all of the programs that were offered at the federal level have been exceptionally helpful to our members. I know that we had some road bumps early on, but that's to be expected, I think, when you're building a plane as you're flying it. And I think we have worked effectively to try to overcome some of them. We know that there still are a few kinks to be ironed out, in particular, getting an updated PPP loan forgiveness form up and running. But I will say, we looked at the numbers. The last SBA report that we had as of June 6th showed that 74,600 or so PPP loans were made to Maryland small businesses, totaling something like $9.85 billion. It's a tremendous amount of money, obviously. There is still, as you know, funding left in that program. And so we're encouraging any of our small business partners that have not yet accessed that tool to do so. Since the deadline is coming up here on June 30th. And we also, in addition to what you outlined and what was mentioned at the federal level, there were a number of state programs that were made available to our small business partners. The money ran out of them very quickly. And so we at the Chamber have just been really trying to actively advocate to make sure that those funds remain or become back available for the small businesses that need them, because they are effective tools in overcoming sort of this cash flow and liquidity issue that our small business owners find themselves grappling with at this time.
Well, thank you. We're going to get into some of those details. We have some questions here from people who have sent in some questions. But Jamon, I want to start with you as to what is the Page 30 Coalition. Now, I want to tell you, I know what the Page 30 Coalition is because I take some pride in what was on Page 30 of the CARES Act. But why don't you describe what this coalition's about?
Well, Senator Cardin, we really do truly appreciate you and your colleagues in the Senate Small Business Committee, your efforts to include this on Page 30 of the CARES Act. We certainly applaud your efforts. My name is Jamon Phenix. I'm the coalition manager of the Page 30 Coalition. The Page 30 Coalition is a collective group of national, state, and local organizations formed to promote and ensure the prioritization of underserved, rural, tribal communities in the CARES Act and beyond. We aim to push a legislative and regulatory agenda by working with partners around the country to bring the sense of the Senate, which Senator Cardin was just talking about, on Page 30 of the CARES Act alive. We are a grassroots organization that welcomes membership from across the country, including individual business owners, community and business organizations, and other entities. And so our coalition understands the unmitigated damage felt throughout the small business ecosystem right now. We see that underserved and rural small businesses are grappling with exacerbated effects of the economic downturn. These firms are facing disproportionate impacts of closures and increased barriers to relief assistance caused by systemic and overlooked errors across sectors, most notably at the federal government level. These historic and structural impediments, conjoined with a national economic crisis, prove catastrophic for traditionally underserved businesses. So the Page 30 Coalition is here to act as a gap filler, to step in the gap and to really help the nation's most underserved and overlooked businesses.
Jamon, thanks for that explanation. I want to tell you on Page 30, there was an amendment that I offered during the development of the PPP program that says that it's a sense of the Congress, sense of the Senate, that the SBA prioritize small business concerns and entities in underserved and rural markets, and particularly small businesses owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Now, let me give you the background for that because I want to get both of your views on this. The background was that we set up the PPP program to get money out quickly to small businesses so they could stay alive. COVID-19 shut our economy down, and we knew small businesses didn't have the resiliency and the capital to withstand that type of economic impact. So we wanted to get money out to small businesses quickly. The only way we could do this was to work through the current commercial institutions that were giving out what is known as 7A loans, which is the largest loan program under the Small Business Administration. We knew we had to use that mechanism, but we were concerned that the underbanked community, which is basically the community that is the most stressed and has been traditionally left out of a lot of the help that we've given at the small business level, would have challenges accessing banking institutions to make these loans when a lot of banks aren't as interested in making small business loans, particularly the smaller businesses in underserved communities. So we specifically put this language in so that there would be a special effort to help the underserved communities. As the program was set up, the initial response was not very favorable. And we heard over and over again that the underserved communities were having difficulty finding a bank that would write the loan, and therefore they were denied, at least initially, the opportunity to participate in the program. So we've had several questions that have been sent in by constituents. I want to get to Chiling Tong, who is the president of the Asian Pacific Islanders Chamber of Commerce. And she basically asks on behalf of the Asian Pacific Island community, but it applies to all minority communities. How do we get a level playing field? What do we need in order to have a level playing field so all businesses, including those that are in underserved communities, those that are in rural areas, those that have traditionally don't have the type of banking relationship as the more established smaller businesses have, what do we need for a level playing field? Jamon, this is right up your alley, so I'll let you start and then we'll get the view of action.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. Chiling is one of the founding members of Page 30 Coalition. So she has been with us since the genesis. So the coalition is supportive of equitable solutions that will bolster opportunities and access to capital in the months and years ahead. We know that these communities that research has showed that were already pushed to the margins before COVID-19, these small business communities will need additional resources. In that we fully support Ranking Member Cardin and Senator Booker's proposal released last month, the Equity and COVID-19 Recovery Act plan. It would immediately help state and local small business funds, require frequent reporting from agencies on all COVID-19 small business relief aid, ensure borrowers receive EIDL grants, among many other solutions. The plan also provides long-term provisions that would reauthorize the state small business credit initiative, establish the Innovative Centers program, and expand the network of women business centers. And so the plan that you put forth was right up the alley of where we should be heading as a country. It's right up the alley of where we should be heading in the years to come, not just this year.
Well, thanks for that. And thanks for giving a plug to the bill that Senator Booker have introduced. We had conversations today in the Senate with Senator Rubio and Senator Collins and Senator Shaheen as to how we can do more to help the underserved community. So there's active discussion taking place on several provisions of that bill. Actually, from the Chamber's point of view, you represent all businesses, including minority businesses, including businesses in underserved communities. What particular advice do you give those small businesses who don't have a priority relationship with a financial institution as to how to go about getting the type of 7A loan in order to qualify for the PPP program?
Sure. Well, first, I would agree with Mr. Phoenix that the proposal that you put forward with Mr. Booker is a great start. We would agree with that premise and support as well. I would also say, just as a note, sort of an aggregate, that the case for greater diversity and equity among businesses and business owners is indisputable, and there's really an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows that greater diversity in businesses and among business leaders benefits our economy, our communities, and our employees. So let's start at that premise. I think at the state level also, the things that we direct our members to by way of state level and state support for small minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses are a number of programs that are run through our governor's office of small minority and women-owned business affairs. And there are a number of programs contained within that office that are meant to address some of those issues with respect specifically to access to Capital 7As and the PPP program. We have encouraged our members to work closely, and we work closely with our partners at the Maryland Bankers Association. Regular, early, active communication and making those connections on their behalf, I think, has been tremendously helpful. But we know that there's much, much more work that needs to be done, and we're committed to doing that. And we look forward to working with the bankers and with our chambers here locally. I appreciate that the question came from a chamber of commerce, and hope that we can make some real progress in that space.
Part of the legislation that I introduced with Senator Booker contains supporting and strengthening the CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions, and minority depository institutions. How helpful is it to build up capacity in these types of institutions for those that are in communities that are generally underserved by the more traditional banking institutions? Either one of you.
Sure, I can take that on. Senator Cardin, just to give a brief story and background, I got my haircut. I get my haircut in Maryland, and my barber, who I invited to this live today, he was actually rejected from a bigger lender when he went to go apply for the program for a PPP loan. And when I got my haircut that day, I said, "Hey, Rich is his name. You could go and you could try a CDFI lender. In fact, let me go home and look up some for you so that you could probably be able to benefit off of one." And that I did, and I went to go send him a long list of Maryland CDFIs in his area. And he is moving forward in that process. And so simply to say, CDFIs also help to fill in the gaps. The Page 30 Coalition is pushing for lawmakers to increase funding for the CDFI fund in the Department of Treasury in next year's appropriations levels. And so we see this as critically important because we understand that minority communities, specifically Black communities, are overwhelmingly underbanked, especially in crises like this. We understand that banks and relationships matter all the most. So we really, really, really need that increase.
Ashley, let me go to you on a question that's asked by Freddie, who wrote in a question: are funds still available under the Paycheck Protection Program? You gave some of the numbers for Maryland, but are you still getting inquiries from small businesses as to whether they can access the funds under the Paycheck Protection Program?
We are, and we are still getting outreach from our membership who are wondering, one, is their funding still available? If so, how much, how to apply, when the deadline is for them to apply. So we're actively conveying that information to them. Like I said, as of that June 6th SBA report, we were calculating about $130.7 billion left. That's a little dated, obviously, at this point. And so we're encouraging our membership to expeditiously, those who still have not yet accessed the PPP funding, that are in a position to be able to do so, to go ahead and do that. And again, I can't stress enough, our partnership with the Maryland Bankers Association on this program, its execution and delivery in particular, is very strong. So we work very closely with them on making sure that we're fully aware of sort of everything that's going on in this space and how best to assist our members in getting those funds quickly.
Well, your numbers are really right on. As of, I think, yesterday, there's still about $130 billion left in the Paycheck Protection Program, $130 billion left in the Paycheck Protection Program. And by the way, $10 billion of that is designated by Secretary Mnuchin. He did this to the CDFIs to make sure, again, that we get to all communities and money is specifically put aside to help the underserved communities. So we want you to know that the funds are still there. The current law, though, you have only until the end of this month to apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan, which can be turned into a loan forgiveness or grant. So those you need to act quickly in regards to the Paycheck Protection Program. We've had about 4.6 million small businesses in this country apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. It covers up to 8 weeks of your payroll costs, plus some additional expenses for rent and utilities. And that if you use it for that intended purpose, you can get 100% loan forgiveness. And it is a very low interest loan if you have to pay it back at 1%. So it's a favorable loan that can be completely forgiven if you use it for the intended purpose on keeping your payroll or paying your utilities. Recently, Congress changed that program to make it even more flexible, allowing small businesses up to 24 weeks to spend the funds that are made available under the Paycheck Protection Program. So this program is open, it's available, but it will close out at the end of this month for those that are interested in taking advantage of this program. I just really wanted to mention that. So, Freddie, funds are there. We're very much interested in continuing applications at this point. We have a Twitter message saying from somebody wanting to know why formerly incarcerated individuals could be disqualified from this program. Let me just ask as a policy reason, is there any reason why someone who has been convicted of a crime, has paid their price to society, they've finished their sentence, they're out, they're productive individuals, they're running a business, they have the same challenges, if not more challenges than any other small business owner. Is there any reason why they should not be qualified to get the Paycheck Protection Program funds? Or is there anything that Congress put in the law that would prevent that?
Senator Cardin, this question, also runs right up our alley. The Page 30 Coalition believes that formerly incarcerated citizens deserve entrepreneurial opportunities and access to capital to start their businesses. I mean, for that reason, we also applaud Secretary Mnuchin's recently released guidance that opened the Paycheck Protection Program to borrowers with previous federal convictions within 1 year of them applying eligibility to the PPP program. And so, your previous convictions should not matter. And I think the swift movement of the Department of Treasury as it relates to the hearing that took place last week in the Senate Small Business Committee hearing, where a bipartisan group of lawmakers called for this action, is poignant. It's important for a time such as now. And so, Congress is able to really, or they set the precedent for this. So we thank you.
And I want to point out that there is nothing in the statute we passed that would prevent returning citizens from being able to get these loans. It was an administrative decision made by Treasury based upon the rules that they had previously applied to 7A loans. So it was not a new policy, but there was an opportunity to do things differently. I must tell you, a bipartisan group of senators, which I was part of. I led an effort on legislation with Senator Portman, a Republican from Ohio, plus members of our committee, including our chairman, Senator Rubio, all expressed concern about the regulation that would have prevented any person who has been convicted of a crime during the last 5 years or was indicted with a crime would be prevented from applying for these funds. Secretary Mnuchin, as you pointed out, has reduced that 5 years to 1 year, and we are appreciative of that. I personally believe we need to go further, not only eliminate it completely, but also to eliminate the provision that allows someone who's under indictment to be prevented from being able to get a loan, even though that person has not had his or her day in court. I might point out there is a blanket exclusion for those who have committed economic fraud type offenses, and that's for good reason. We certainly understand why they would be disqualified. Actually, I want to get to, if you try to help me answer Robert's question. Robert is a small business, owns a small business contracting company. He has received the PPP loans. He's just about has exhausted those funds. And he says it's not enough. Are there any other tools available or being considered that could help me in my contracting company? What are you hearing from chamber members as to whether the tools that were made available under PPP, or I might add also EIDL, and we'll talk about that in a minute, whether it's enough or whether they're going to need additional attention as a result of COVID-19?
So I think you referenced PPP, you referenced EIDL. The other program that I wanted to flag is the Federal Reserve Main Street Lending Program. It's another tool in the toolkit that we can talk about. I think, like I mentioned, we're conducting a survey of our members right now, our small business members, to figure out sort of what are still your immediate challenges, and access to cash flow and liquidity remain a top concern. It shoots all the other responses out of the park. And so I think if you asked any of my small business owners, is it enough? They would probably argue that it's not and that more could be done, but we also know that we have to approach things in a balanced way. With respect to the Federal Reserve Main Street Lending Program, it's one that we're talking more and more about with our members, but we're learning that there appears to be low borrower interest in the program, probably due to the high minimum loan amount initially. But the terms of it are very favorable. And we know that the Fed just announced that they lowered that minimum loan amount, which should help, we hope. Though we wonder if it could be lowered more. And, this is really being offered as a PPP alternative to small and medium businesses. We'd like to see it tweaked so that it does become available to more businesses. But of course, we know that with every program and policy, there's a balance to be had, and there's debate, of course, over how each will function, who will benefit most from it. But really, we at the Chamber are supportive and active in advocating for any tool at this point that can be utilized to support our businesses as they work to retain their employees, to continue to operate at a reduced capacity, of course, here in Maryland, because though we're moving in the right direction in our roadmap to recovery, there's still a long road to go before we're fully reopened and up and running by way of our commerce here. So I think, is it enough? It is a great start, but I think if you ask some of my small business members, they'd be asking, sort of what's the next phase?
So Herman, who's watching us live on Facebook Live, asks, how do employees benefit from the PPP program? Ashley, how do employees benefit from the program?
Sure, so I can take that. I mean, the simple answer is that the employees benefit from the PPP program by being able to be kept on payroll. And maintain their employment, maintain their benefits. And so when a small business owner applies for those funds, they're really looking toward continuity of operations. We're learning from our small business members, truly, their first priority is their employees. The first thing they're thinking about is their employees. The last thing that they want to cut are the salaries or benefits for their employees. So this program, these funds are a bridge to be able to keep those employees whole and keep them on payroll. And make sure that they're taken care of.
That's a very important point, and that's one of the reasons why Democrats and Republicans came together on this proposal. It was really bipartisan. The bill ultimately passed 96-0 in the United States Senate. And what we really liked about it is exactly what you just said. It allows a company the continuity of keeping their workforce in place. They could lay off their workers and they would get unemployment insurance. And they need unemployment insurance, and we provided for unemployment insurance. But it's certainly much more favorable to the business to keep their workforce intact. And workers want to be on payroll. They want to work. They want to do as much as they can to keep the business viable, because they know after COVID-19 is through, that company can come back, their jobs are going to be secure, and their future is secure. So the PPP program, Paycheck Protection, is to protect paycheck. And even with the most recent change, we required that at least 60% of the funds that are borrowed, if you want to get the maximum forgiveness, must be used for payroll. and the calculation is based upon 75%. So it is intentional to help the worker, and that's why there's strong bipartisan support for the program. Our original bill was aimed at getting money out quickly to small businesses. It was the largest stimulus package ever passed, I think, since FDR's New Deal. So it was a major effort to get money out quickly, and we got money out quickly. What should come next? We had basically a self-certification on need. What should the next round of aid look like? And I would really like to get the views of both of our panelists. I've introduced you all before, but in case you have late viewers, we have Ashley Duckman from the Maryland Chamber of Commerce and Jamon Phenix from Page 30 Coalition. So if we're going to modify the PPP program to provide additional benefits, how should we go about doing it?
Senator Cardin, this is so important to the coalition. We are thinking not only of short term, but as I stated before, a long-term approach to make sure that Main Street America is sustained in the years ahead. And so we applaud lawmakers, dedication to these businesses. But we also believe that Congress should take a targeted and equity-based approach in whatever packages that will come next. We understand, and to tack on to actually Ashley's point, outside of liquidity, small businesses, especially underserved small businesses, are in need of technical assistance. So we want to capitalize on that TA and make sure that technical assistance within the agencies, specifically the Small Business Administration, is made permanent. That community advantage programs in microloan programs are made permanent. These are all of the tools that will codify and that will really incubate these businesses that are in most need. This will give them the resources to really just exist and to thrive in the future. So that's what we expect next, or that's where Congress should go next.
Thank you for that. Ashley, your thoughts? We should go.
Yeah, thank you. And I would echo some of what Mr. Phenix said. I think that from our perspective, continuing or extending the PPP program in some form or fashion is needed and necessary, and tweaks where needed and necessary to ensure that those funds get to the businesses that are most in need. We had the experience building the plane while flying it. We're coming out on the other side of that. We now have examples to look to of what worked, what didn't work. And so in the next phase is a good opportunity to make those fixes to ensure that those who need it most, those who are underserved, who weren't able to get those funds in the first several rounds, are able to do so. The other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention is, I looked at the Page 30 Coalition list of membership, and I noticed many chambers of commerce were part of that membership. And our chambers of commerce nationwide are the front line in supporting small businesses during this time. We are their workforce developers. We are helping them access tools. We are working around the clock to make sure that our small businesses get what they need to stay afloat and overcome the pandemic. And so, Senator Cardin, I know that you're aware that we have been very fiercely advocating for our chambers of commerce, our local, regional, and state chambers of commerce to be able to access some of that financial support. And we hope in the next round of those discussions that will be given another look, so that some of our local and county chambers that are really struggling right now, even while they're working around the clock to help their small businesses get the support that they need to be able to be that front line and to continue to provide that resource to their membership.
Well, and thanks both of you for those answers. Let me just share with you, we had discussions today in our among the leadership of our committee as to what this would look like. We had a oversight hearing week, small business committee, which has already been referenced here, and which Secretary Mnuchin acknowledged that the administration believes additional help is going to be needed for small businesses. You both raised a couple different points that are important. One, there are eligibility rules that need to be reviewed. And it was the members of the Senate that pushed very hard to get the nonprofit community included in these small business programs. So we take great pride in including nonprofits. Treasury did not have the numbers so that we could go beyond the traditional 501c3 nonprofits. When you deal with trade associations such as the Chamber, which are 501c6s, by definition, they were not made eligible, but there's no logical reason why they're not eligible. So yes, these are issues that we're going to clearly have to take up in regards to the eligibility issues. And I thank you for mentioning that, Ashley. Secondly, the point that Jamon, you have raised in regards to again, the underserved communities, we're looking very carefully as to how we can make sure we get help to them. You mentioned the 7A Community Advantage Program, the microloan programs. These programs have a much better track record to help the underserved communities. So anything we can do to bolster those programs, I think would be beneficial. And we're certainly looking at that. We're also looking at using a definition or giving some preference to smaller small businesses, because we find the smaller small businesses generally have a more difficult time. And then lastly, the first round was based solely on self-certification. As we look to give additional help, we may use some of the more traditional indicators for federal government help, including demonstrating a significant revenue loss before you get a second round of help. These are all issues that are on the table, but I want to get back to the point actually that you raised a little bit earlier, and that is there are more programs available than just the Paycheck Protection Program. You mentioned state and local governments have programs available. There's the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and of course we added to it under the CARES Act a grant program. What I find somewhat surprising is that a lot of small businesses don't recognize they can apply for both a PPP loan and an EIDL loan, and they can get both. And yet the number of applications for PPP is much, much, much higher than those who have accessed the EIDL program. And the EIDL program can give you money to deal with working capital, to give you money to deal with those issues that are not covered under the PPP program. So is there a way that we can better utilize the EIDL program to help Robert and others who have gotten the PPP program but still need help?
Well, to jump in, if I could jump in very quickly, the EIDL program is a big program as well. And, we truly appreciate that the SBA and Treasury's ability to roll out the funds for these programs, in addition to the signature Paycheck Protection Program. But on our end, what we have noticed is that with EIDL loan applicants, that when you have minority or underserved entrepreneurs going out to get a loan that is based on credit or around that area, it makes a little harder, on top of not having a business relationship, to access capital. And so what may be contributing to this trend of high PPP and low EIDL applicants is based on credit. And outside of that, the SBA has just this week reopened the EIDL loan applications to everyone. Previously, and I believe for a few weeks, it has only been for agricultural businesses. So there are myriad of different reasons that may have contributed to that, Senator. But I do want to echo and stress your point that small businesses are able to take advantage of this. And the EIDL loan is set to have an EIDL advance grant up to $10,000 that does not have to be repaid. And so that's something that's significantly important when you think of micro businesses, or, Senator, to your point, businesses with fewer than 10 employees, which happens to be the largest sector of small businesses in our nation. This will be beneficial for smallest businesses and vulnerable businesses.
Actually, do you add anything to that?
No, I think I would echo much of what Mr. Phoenix suggested by way of, sort of why, some speculation about why maybe the idle grants or idle loans were underutilized. I think it'll be interesting to see now that things have reopened, what the difference is now that, we're sort of moving toward we're approaching the deadline to apply to PPP. And I think folks are now starting to explore all of their options. I will say at the chamber, we make available all of these programs and tools and try to work with our members on a case-by-case basis to determine what makes most sense of them. I mean, we are a small staff, but a mighty staff, and we do our best to make sure that our small business members that come to us with these concerns or want to know what is available to them know which programs fit their profile or their needs best, or sort of try to understand their business, their relationships to determine where to steer them. I would also stress again, there are though our state level programs had run out of funding relatively quickly, there are a number of county and local government opportunities still available. They are small, but they are helpful. They're particularly helpful for small business owners that are looking to do things like transition some of their technology needs to adapt to making their workplaces more safe. Those kinds of opportunities are still out there and are still available. So I'd encourage you and anyone who's watching who is a business owner looking for those resources to visit our businessexpress.maryland.gov webpage, which will help you identify where money is still available.
That's very helpful. The PPP program has a formula funding for how much a loan you can receive. It's basically 2.5 times your monthly payroll that you can borrow. And as I said, ultimately, you can get all that loan forgiven. The maximum is $10 million. Under the EIDL program, your limit is $2 million that you can borrow. It's not a formula program. It's based more on your working capital needs over the next several months. So generally, if you're a smaller business, you can get a larger amount of money through the EIDL program than you can under the PPP program. Having said that, the administration, why we don't know, set an arbitrary $150,000 limit on the EIDL loan, which is contrary to what Congress intended. So that has also, I think, affected the interest in using EIDL loans. And you're correct in that there is underwriting involved. So it's given out by the SBA directly, not a commercial lender, but there are underwriting standards in order to be able to get an EIDL loan. Well, Michelle asks, one of our viewers, is there any thought of extending the application deadline for businesses looking to apply for their first PPP loan? I'm interested as to what we heard from businesses as to whether they need additional time.
I sorry to jump in. I have not heard the cry that there needs to be additional time. I think that any effort that we can make to give that latitude to our small business owners, who some of which are still trying to figure out their need, right? I'm hearing from a lot of business owners actually in recent weeks that they perhaps didn't move as quickly to furlough employees or to reduce operations because they thought perhaps that commerce would open more quickly than it did. So they're having to make some of those tougher decisions actually right now. And so I think as they work through this, we're in a situation that evolves daily, hourly. And so I think any opportunity that our small business owners have to get some more time and to get that latitude would be helpful and beneficial to them, particularly because, as I said, some of them were a little bit on the later side in terms of, understanding what changes need to be made to their business for them to withstand what is now, I think, for some of them, a more protracted closure of commerce or, slower reopening of commerce than maybe some of them anticipated. So my answer is I think any opportunity they have to get that extra time would be helpful.
And to basically echo that sentiment, I think it's a day by day, week by week situation right now as it relates to businesses really needing to understand where they are. We are seeing in some states, like in Arizona, a spike in coronavirus cases, which may in fact may put a push and pull factor on social distancing, and may even implement more guidelines as to business closures. And so it is a thing to say right now that we just simply don't know. On top of that, we also in our area have seen a disproportionate impact of small business closures, specifically Black businesses. In the month of February, in March and April, over 41% of the Black business population actually, just disappeared because of this. And so to say that, the PPP program, which just extended covered the covered loan period date and just modified the 75-25 rule to 60-40 rule for small businesses. To say that this program needs to close or will close June 30th is just not helpful to the longer term, I guess, the elasticity of these businesses and longer term lifeline of these businesses. So it's just simply we must wait it out and play the wait and see game.
So let me just give you an update on the politics of this. I agree with both of our panelists. I think we should give maximum flexibility. When we passed the PPP program in March, we really thought that by July 1st, our economy would be back to its normal pre-COVID existence. That's not going to be the case. So this impact on our economy is going to go on a lot longer than through June 30. So I agree, we should give more flexibility. We considered that when we did the modifications to the PPP program just a few weeks ago, and there seemed to be opposition to extending the program beyond June 30 on applications. So I'm just pointing that out because, Michelle, the question you asked, if you're thinking about this program, you have to act on the assumption that it will close at the end of this month. And you need to get in before the last day of the month because you got to get your applications processed. That takes some time too. So if you're interested, you really should do this immediately and go to a financial institution that's participating and get your application in. The next time Congress has an opportunity to act on the PPP program will probably be after June 30. Doesn't mean we won't do something about that date, but I think it is a high risk factor if you're waiting, thinking that Congress may extend the program. If we allow for a second round, obviously that will be well beyond June 30. And there's also a concern as to keeping the program open into 2021 as far as being able to make payments and get forgiveness. And that's another issue that we're going to have to deal with. But I would just urge people to understand what's in the law and to know that we are trying to give more flexibility. We've already shown that. And I think there is significant interest to give greater flexibility that's in the current law, but we'll wait to see whether we can in fact get that done. So one of my best friends, former Maryland Senator Jim Mathias, is on the line, and he wants to know what other programs we're working on to support higher education. I can imagine he used that because of his role at UMES, entrepreneurial programs and research centers. I'm going to narrow this to the entrepreneurial programs because there was included in the small business programs direct help to our resource partners, those that are designed to help our veterans, those that are designed to help women, those that are designed to help minority businesses. We did provide direct relief to these resource partners, and I'm just interested to hear, I think I'll start first with Jamon, as to whether that's been a help and whether there's more that needs to be done.
And so, Senator Cardin, thank you for that question. That's an amazing question to ask because it really represents the intersection of where we need to be leading out of this crisis, this economic crisis. To give a final answer, I would reflect back to the last answer that I gave, the sentiment of we just don't know right now because the SBA and Treasury has yet to release oversight or transparency guidance for these programs. But what we do know is that agencies like the Minority Business Development Agency, Women Business Centers, that large network and others are able to really codify and just help and assist small businesses in the ways that, that these larger funding programs that overlook may these businesses, these MBDAs and WBCs are able to help. So that's what we do know. To give a final answer and to give a percentage, that is, I won't say impossible right now, but that will be hard to do.
And actually, we've been working very closely with the chamber, these resource partners. I'm interested on how the chamber looks at the help from women's business centers and minority business development centers, our veteran business programs, those type of programs. How helpful are they to your members?
Well, they're very helpful to our members. I would echo some of what Mr. Phenix said in terms of based on what we know so far from what's come from the federal government, specifically post-COVID, it would be hard to quantify or to say. In a sort of general way, we know that these types of entities are exceptionally important, critically important to those communities, to those businesses and their leaders. The other thing I would say is that in this space in particular, in helping entrepreneurs and helping underserved communities, entrepreneurs in underserved communities, there are other great state level resources that could use the support that are doing this effectively, that could do more if they were given more support. A great example is the Maryland Small Business Development Center, which was run out of the University of Maryland and is a great partner to us. They provide free consulting and low cost training services to entrepreneurs throughout our state. Last session, actually, in Maryland, they had an effort underway to get more funding, and the goal of that funding, their intended use for those requested funds, was to hire and retain more consultants and trainers for underserved communities statewide. They were looking also to hire more Spanish-speaking staff and to better serve our state's fast-growing population of Hispanic entrepreneurs. Also part of that funding request, they were seeking to provide more consultants and trainers within Baltimore City. We worked really closely with them on that effort. Their leadership is wonderful to work with. They did a great job. The bill did pass the General Assembly to try to get that additional funding, but unfortunately, because of the economic impact of COVID on our state level budget, our Governor Hogan did unfortunately have to veto it just because of that budget constraint. So I would say that those programs, those opportunities, the infrastructure exists. It's just a matter of making sure that they have the resources that they need to be able to effectively help these communities that they are trying to serve.
I thank you for mentioning the SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers. In the one located in Maryland at College Park, in 1 month, between April and May, handled more requests than they did in the prior 12 months combined. So they have been utilized by small businesses to access the programs that we made available under the CARES Act. So I appreciate you mentioning that and giving them their due plug. I also want to announce some good news. I think you all know this. Maryland has a women's business center that is headquartered in Rockville. It helps serve not just in Rockville, it provides services in Montgomery, Prince George's County, Frederick County. The SBA just recently announced at our request that 2 additional women's business centers will receive grant funds in Maryland. So we'll now have 3 women business centers. The other 2 will be located in Baltimore at HBCU and Morgan, and the other will be in Salisbury. So we are very pleased that we're seeing expansions of these types of program help for small businesses in our state. You both have mentioned a real problem we have. That is, we don't have the data to analyze how successful this program has been or where the problems are. We get gross numbers, but we don't know how many loans are being made in a congressional district or at a zip code so that we can try to define the type of businesses that are getting the help under these programs. We also don't have the transparency that we should have in regards to individual borrowers, and I want to ask a question on that in a moment. And then lastly, our general accounting office that is responsible for auditing hasn't been able to get the information either. So there is a real need to get this data. Again, there was a conversation today between, and Senator Rubio, again, the Republican chair, I'm the Democratic ranking member. The 2 of us have joined together in making this request, keeping it bipartisan. We need to get this information if we're going to be able to evaluate the program properly and go to the next level as to what should be done. I would think that both of you and your organizations would need to have that information to answer some of the questions we're talking about.
Absolutely, Senator Cardin. Just to echo your points, and to say something, that we all know that what gets measured gets done. So we failed to measure, we failed to see the data on what's being deployed right now. We just won't know where to target these efforts that will eventually impact underserved in rural communities. The Page 30 Coalition, we are moving and we understand the SBA and Treasury's hard time that they deployed billions of dollars within such a short time frame, and they stood up the PPP program and they increased the idle loan program to support millions of businesses, and that they did this in such a short time, but we just really, really want to drive home the point that data is needed right now. Data is needed not only to, save small businesses, but to ensure that more businesses are created in the future. Just one critical point: if we measure the amount or the lives that we lose, unfortunately, to COVID-19, we must also measure, the money that it's actually being given out to small businesses in the PPP and idle programs. And basically, my lasting principle to what I just said was, data is important. We cannot overlook it, and we urge the agencies to release it, and we join in with Democratic and Republican lawmakers in both House and Senate to make sure that the agencies do this.
Ashley, Secretary Mnuchin raised certain concerns on releasing this information that is proprietary to a business. The argument he makes is that the PPP program, unlike the traditional 7A program, there's a formula that's used for the amount of the loan. So if you know the individual business, you know the amount of the loan, you may very well know their payroll, and that could be proprietary information. I mention that because 7A programs require full transparency, whereas they have not made full transparency available in the PPP program. Your view on what Secretary said and on disclosure.
Sure. Well, I would echo Mr. Phoenix's remarks that data and analysis are critical for us to have to understand where the resources are going and how we can more effectively deploy whatever we have going forward. So let's start with the premise that we must have that data and analysis at our fingertips as part of our toolkit when we're talking about what the next phase of recovery is going to be and what that package is going to look like. We are aware that members from both sides of the aisle have urged the administration to disclose loan recipients in recent weeks. And we also know, to your point, Senator, that the Senate Small Business Committee has been having ongoing discussions and how to achieve the appropriate balance between what is oversight and transparency, accessing that data and analysis that we so desperately need while protecting the information of small businesses. So that is a process, one that we fully support, those discussions, those efforts, coming to an agreement. We've read and we're aware, everyone's aware of the reports that some of those PPP funds in the early days of the program went to businesses that didn't need it. And we have always and will continue to support the funding being diverted first to those most in need, and access to information, both of how things worked and didn't work effectively, is critically important to that mission.
And we've had discussions again as recently as today, and we do anticipate that Secretary Mnuchin will make certain announcements in regards to disclosure as early as this week. So I know he's working on that. I had introduced legislation that would have required full disclosure. I still feel that's the best way. I think there are ways that we can protect the proprietary information by using ranges rather than exact numbers. So I think there's ways of dealing with the specific concerns that Secretary Mnuchin raised. But I do hope we can get this resolved quickly because we are flying somewhat blind by not having the specific information that we need. All right, the number one question that I've received is what I think, Ashley, you raised a little bit earlier, and that is, why do you need an 11-page form for loan forgiveness, for goodness sakes, can't you figure this is supposed to be an easy program, the PPP program? Can't you come up with something that is a little bit easier so we don't have to spend half the money we get on an accountant or a lawyer or an advocate in order to fill out our forms? Well, we have, and I have not fully analyzed this right off the press. We have, which is the 3508 easy form. It's literally one page from the point of view of calculation and 1.5 pages that you have to read to certify that you've complied with the law. But it certainly looks a lot better than what we had seen during the original drafts of the loan forgiveness. This becomes particularly important because the period for loan forgiveness for some has expired. Some businesses are now going to make their applications and want to get these loans off the books and believe they're entitled to forgiveness, and they are, and they need to have a form that they can complete without having to go through a long, drawn-out process. So from the Chamber's point of view, I hope you'll review this form. Let us know whether we think the Treasury got it right. But I know you've heard a lot from small businesses in regards to the original form that was sent out.
We have, and I'm smiling from ear to ear to be able to see that printed form in your hand. I know my friends from the Bankers Association who are probably on watching our Facebook Live are also grinning from ear to ear to see that form printed and actually a physical copy of it. We have maintained that getting this done expeditiously is a real help for small businesses as they work to plan for the future, for operations, for bringing employees back, and just their economic recovery generally over the next several months and years. So we're grateful, we're appreciative. We absolutely will review alongside our other partners and look forward to continuing to work with you to make sure that we get it right and try to make this process as seamless for our small businesses as we can.
And Jamon, we've heard from smaller small businesses and those that do not have the capacity to do a lot of paperwork on their own, that they don't have a staff to do that, that the cost factor of completing the loan forgiveness form would be a real burden on the smaller small business. Are you hearing from your types of the businesses that are part of your coalition a concern about the original form that was sent out?
Well, yes, I think that we all know completing these types of, forgiveness applications are just, we're not CPAs, and a lot of small businesses are run, just by sole proprietorships or, self-employed entrepreneurs. And what we know is that this has been intrinsically hard. We are excited, just as you are, and actually, that the SBA and Treasury has released this new application, and also the easy application for sole proprietorships. So what we know and what we hear is that this is easier, that this is better, that it has been a challenge in the past, but we do expect for Treasury to release more frequently asked questions to ensure that businesses, specifically underserved, minority, underbanked communities, are able to get the technical assistance, or just be able to sufficiently fill out the information in the fastest and most correct way possible.
Well, I want to thank both of my panelists today for their insight and information. I found it helpful, and I know that our viewers got a lot of information today. So to Ashley Duckman from the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for what you do for small businesses in our community. Jamon Phenix from the Page 30 Coalition, helping the underserved communities. Thank you so much for everything you do to help small businesses and our entire economic family here in the state of Maryland and our nation. And I want to thank all of you for viewing us today on Facebook Live, and we'll be coming to you again soon. So stay safe, and if you have additional questions, let our offices know. Stay well, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.